We're waiting on Julie to join us before we get started. Hopefully a few other people coming on. Just want to acknowledge those of us who are here at 12. There's Julie logging on.
Jacob, I am here.
Hey, Julie.
How are you?
I am doing well.
It is good to see all of you.
Julie, whenever we're ready to start, I have the documents on the website ready to pull up. Just let me know where we want to go first.
Perfect. Jacob, I think it would be great to pull up the agenda, review the agenda, and if we could then do roll call, and then we'll head in there if that sounds like a plan.
Sounds good. Okay, everybody, let's go ahead and get started. People can come on as we go. So first item of business, here's to a successful meeting today and wrapping up all of the hard work that we've done to this point. I know Julie and I and Tristan feel like we're in a good place and we can put a bow on all of the good conversations that we've had to date today. So we have a few things on the agenda we have to get to specifically. There's really nothing that we're going to look at today that we didn't talk about last week, or at least see a preview of. We've still got just a few things in chapter 4 to finalize. If you remember in the class 3, we had a couple pieces around adjusting the language that currently says T12 principal license, adjusting that so it just said a principal license to allow more flexibility. So we had a few questions around how that impacted our team's reporting and other ramifications that we wanted to discuss today before we clean that up. And then class 4 and class 5 licenses that we looked at last week and had discussion, but we just didn't finalize, by meaning giving it a yay or a nay. Chapter 3, endorsement, thinking about provisions there to help add flexibility for endorsement. Then our general provisions in subchapter 2, some language has been added around reciprocity for military spouses, language around ETP verification for the state superintendent. Again, things we've all talked about that need to get to. And then finally, subchapter 1, because all of the above have some cascading effects to some of the definitions that we've had to put in. And then, if all things go well, we wrap it up today. So thank you, everybody, for being here. Tristan, are you ready to help with roll call?
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Please.
How about everyone just say how you're handling all of this cold weather? Get a snow update from y'all. Let's start with Angela.
Good afternoon. Dressing in more layers than normal.
Christine.
Wearing a raincoat. All we got was rain and now it's sunny.
Oh, well, geez, way to rub it in. We got Dan.
You know what? We actually just 12 miles east of Christine, we actually had snow. So Yeah, it's good. I love it.
Awesome. And Dean.
I'm actually here. Just make sure that my library is stocked with a coat and hat and gloves and boots for when I get to do recess duty.
Awesome. And Erica Allen just popped on.
I am here.
Erica, how's the snow where you're at?
None. We're actually getting warmer, and so I'm living in the Bahamas, I think. I don't know. We'll hang on to it.
That's great. And Diane. Maybe Diane's not able to talk right now. How about Heather?
Hey everyone, we got 12 inches at my house and 3 inches at school, so it was a fun transition.
Goodness. John.
Make a motion.
I think we've gotten about 9 inches here in town, quite a bit more up in the mountains, and it's that lovely, wet, summery spring snow that is brutal to try to shovel.
Yeah, very heavy. Jewel.
For the day, doesn't.
Good afternoon. Actually, the sun is trying to shine here in Helena, so a little bit, of course, there are several of you here with us, but you know, a little cooler, but still a great fall day.
Yeah, it is beautiful outside. How about Nick?
Yeah, I'm here. There's plenty of snow and mud.
And Sharon.
Here, 12 to 18 inches of snow and digging ourselves out with the tractor. Everything else gets stuck.
Oh my goodness. And Valerie.
Hi, everyone. I am actually about 45 miles west of Kansas City, enjoying 73 degrees and blue skies and sunshine.
Oh, that's perfect.
Sorry about that. Sorry to rub that in.
And I think maybe I've only missed Mike.
No snow, but I had a board meeting last night, so I have my AC on still because I still feel like I'm in the hot seat.
I'm sure you did great. Awesome. I think I didn't miss anyone. Welcome, guys.
Thanks, Tristan. All right, Julie, you had some follow-up on Chapter 4 administrators.
Yeah, so it's good to see all you guys. You guys had some critical questions last week regarding Class 3 administrative licenses around the endorsements and the codes and then how that gets connected to teams. So I thought I would just take a few minutes to share that information with you of what I found out, and then we can go into the rule. So I'm going to share my screen. Can you guys see that? Okay, perfect. Thanks, Mike. So the question that we had, you guys, was regarding the administrative principal licenses around the K-12, the 512 secondary, and the K-8 elementary, as to if those are separated in rule. Is there some connection to how they are outlined in rule to how then they get processed and validated in teams as well? So because we were talking about potentially consolidating that down to one rule that says, depending on the level that you get assigned, then that's the endorsement you'll get. So what I have here up on the screen, you guys, is that endorsement codes that are used in MSIS are not directly tied to the number in rule. Rather, they're a separate code for endorsements. And so a principal code is 30. And then a letter gets applied to it to designate the particular level of that endorsement for the principal. So an A stands for all, which is K-12, S for secondary, and E for elementary. So when someone applies for a license in MSIS to be a principal, they select the level, elementary K-8, secondary, or K-12. And then it automatically codes it. And then that's the endorsement code, if you will, that gets put onto their license and then is also put into the system to correlate with teams. So when I talked to Nathan Miller, who's our director at the accreditation, I said, Nathan, what happens then when you take those codes that are in TOES and then you start looking at teams to say, is this principal that's endorsed, for example, 512 at a secondary level, are they appropriately assigned at then a school that is 512? And so this is what Nathan said to me. He said, I want to really be clear that there's a difference between the superintendent and the principal. He said, because we only have one endorsement in the superintendent. And he said, that's for the K-12 or all. He said, so when we have a superintendent endorsement, it is not secondary or elementary specific. He said, we do, however, have the 3 principal endorsements. It is rare, he said, to see a principal with either the K-8 or the 512 endorsement. And if that it does happen, it's usually from an out-of-state education prep program. And if we see a deviation for an administrator in both the superintendent and principal roles, because we do know in the state of Montana, we have folks who play both of those roles, where they are the principal and the secondary and the superintendent. He said in those cases, they never have a deviation in the superintendent level. Rather, it would show up at the principal endorsement level that would potentially cause a deviation. He said, but I really want to stress, he said that they don't really see this happen. He said, this is really rare that it would come up that a superintendent would have a principal endorsement that is causing a deviation for them. But he said they never have had a superintendent endorsement that is misassigned or misaligned, if you will. And so he said he could only think of about 2 to 3 cases where this has happened, and it was more of because of a grandfather thing where people were superintendents already, and they'd had done some, they'd done their principalship and they were in the superintendent role and they didn't want to go back to get that additional principal endorsement to be the superintendent. So they just kept the deviation. He said that was really, really rare. He said that was like 2 times that he's seen that. So I just wanted to share that with you because I think that is pertinent to our conversation about, can we actually condense those administrative rules down to one? The answer would be yes. When I spoke to the licensure specialist, they said that actually they would like that. They said that that is really how they do it anyways, that the way that the rule is spread out has nothing to do with the endorsements and the issuing of the license. So they said that they thought that'd be great to condense that language. One other thing really quick about that superintendent piece, because we talked about the superintendent piece saying you had to have a principal license that was endorsed K-12. It couldn't be the K-8 or the 512. That is more of that's not an endorsement issue for MSIS or for teams or for accountability. And in fact, Nathan said, well, I want to point something out to you. He goes, we don't even really apply that in our internship either. He says we grant internships for superintendents based for their that can't get the provisional 5 that can enroll in the internship. He said on the application, it says in order for a superintendent to participate in that internship program, they just need to be currently licensed at a principal. It doesn't matter what level. So I wanted to share that with you as well. So before we kind of jump into rule, I wanted to give you guys an opportunity to kind of ask me questions about what I found out and any of this information that I've shared. All right, thank you guys. Let's go ahead then and look, Jacob, if you want to now, I will stop sharing and you can pull up rule. And according to our agenda, we're going to take off today at the Class 3 administrative license. So The administrative license starts at 1057,413. You guys have done some work to already include and recommend that counseling license could be either the teaching or the counseling in schools. And so that piece has been included. Another suggested change here is that number 4, an applicant for a class 3 license who has completed the EPP and currently licensed in another state may be considered for licensure if they have 3 years of administrative experience to be in line with the other 3 years that we've spoken about. Moving to the 414. This is about the endorsements that we talked about. And there was a recommendation that we not put the 3 credits in there, but to rather say that in the EPPs, that students would be getting the administrative preparation and that the Montana Educator preparation programs would figure out the requirements of what the coursework would look like to cover these 3 following areas, rather than it being 3 credits of each of these, to provide more flexibility for the educator preparation programs to figure out how to combine that, if you will, and to ensure that their educators or their administrators do have all of those pieces built within however they design their coursework. We did talk about adding here that if you actually are teaching one of those courses, that would be the same as actually taking it and should be in lieu of credit. That is similar to what we have for our teachers, that if you teach a graduate degree program, that can be considered the same as taking that course. And then we talked about, this is the piece around the licensure being for whatever endorsement area you're seeking. And so that 415 and 16 would all kind of come up together to be for whatever of the endorsement area that you're seeking. And the last thing is we wanted to be sure that we really called out that IFA piece, because if we do have administrators coming from out of state who did not have a teacher license in the state of Montana, but rather had a teaching license out of the state, that they had that IFA component as well in order to get the administrative license. So now you will see that with the 415, rather than elementary, it just says administrative license to be, whether it's the elementary, secondary, or K-12, that you have to attend a preparation program and have that at the level of which you're requesting the endorsement. That is why 416's moved up and 417 is moved up, is to condense that language. For 18 is for a supervisor who might be supervising a content area such as music or counseling. We've added the class 6 in there as well, like the teaching requirement. 419. There was a question around, we want to be consistent with saying that it's 3 years of experience for an accredited school setting. This would be for a supervisor component as well. And that really kind of, you guys, covers the pieces around the class 3. There was only one question that was brought forward to me over the week, which was, Jacob, if you could scroll back up in, and I wanted to bring this to the task force for you all to have a discussion and figure out what your thoughts are, is around the, keep going up to the 413. Sorry, one more, sorry. 412? Is that, nope, 412 is, I'm sorry, it is 413, maybe it's 414, sorry. Okay, stop right there, 414. You guys, is around C. The question was, for consistency purposes, if we are adding an opportunity for it to be 6 credits or professional development opportunities for those six, what were recency credits, so 6 semester credits. And we're allowing it to be, 60 professional development units. And that we're providing that avenue for our teachers. What are the thoughts about adding that similar opportunity for administrators? That it wouldn't be, you have to take these courses, if you will, just at the university, that it's an option to take also professional development related to these content areas as well. So that was a question. So I stand for any dialogue or comments about this, about all of the class 3 before we move forward. So Jacob, I don't know if anyone in the group is ready to answer that question, maybe starting right there. What are your thoughts about this 414 about the Montana Educator Preparation Program requirements and it not being 3 credits of each, and or leave it as it's written here? Or do we want to also consider as a group and open up a conversation around that this could be like the teacher piece, that it could be professional development and not just college credit?
Okay. First of all, Sharon, did we address your question about collective bargaining? Yep. Okay. Any comments about what Julie brought up in terms of C and how professional development language could fit in there? Any, Sean?
Yeah, I was just going to say that makes sense to me to make this area and the other area similar in regard to the requirements. So I think it's a good conversation, and I would support some kind of development around that kind of verbiage.
Erica?
I get to the 6 credits need to be in certain like school law or finance or certain areas. I guess if they do, then I don't think that professional development would have the same effect. If they don't, then I think I would be up for, exploring that.
Yeah, so I think the way it reads now is that it really reads, you have to have a certain number of credits in the program, and within that program, a certain portion of it has to be in Montana school law, Montana school finance, Montana collective bargaining. So it really speaks to your program as much as anything. So I think you're questioning, Erica.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And I guess it was, since there are specific things that the superintendents do need to know. And so I would, I guess, be a little bit nervous about just opening up to just general professional development, that you're not going to get the right criteria, the right classes.
To that point, Julie, I think you're saying that, well, actually, Julie, I don't know what you're saying. So what would the 60 hours of professional development replace in C or be equivalent to? What's the proposal?
So I think, Jacob, where it starts to really come into play is not so much about the EPP programs that are here in Montana, but rather maybe somebody who comes from out of state. Many a times they'll have to get a provisional because they will need to take these courses because they don't have them unique to Montana. And so the question becomes not necessarily that if you are in the graduate program in Montana, that this is included in that program, but rather is it, if you're coming in from out of state, is the only option for you to attend college to get these courses and do college semester credits, if you will, versus allowing for them to take professional development courses in these areas.
So what would the proposed language look like from your point of view?
Crystal, do you have that language?
What language or do you want me to pull up? I'm sorry.
We're looking for language around the 60 professional development units in these areas.
So would it be something to the effect of 18 semester graduate credit hours in school administration, 12 of which must be beyond a master's degree and include Montana EPP requirements in each of the EPP requirements, or 60 hours of professional development in each of the following?
That is correct.
Or total, encompassing the following?
That would be in each of the following. And I'm just leaving that up to discussion, you guys. I don't, that's what we're proposing. Yes.
So 60 hours in each of the following would be, I'd have to have 60 hours in school law, 60 hours in school finance.
No, it would be it would be 60 within, and you guys, when we look at this too, like 12 is much more than just 60, right? That is 12 is closer to about 120, if I'm not wrong.
But you wouldn't replace 12 hours beyond a master's degree with PD. That would still have to be university credit. You're only talking about replacing the three choices that are Montana specific with some form of PD.
Yes, and it probably comes down into the class 5 for those that are getting a provisional. So maybe it doesn't even live here, you guys.
So for clarity, the 18 semester hours stays the same, the 12 hours above the master's degree stays the same, but it would provide another path to gain knowledge about Montana school law, Montana school finance, and Montana collective bargaining, than having to take a university class on it, is what the proposal is.
Yeah, and I do think, Jacob, that lands in the class 5 provisional, because it's not about when you're in this program, right? Because if you attend a Montana state program for administrative prep, you're going to get these things built in there, because our rule is saying you have to have it, right? It's about when you come from out of state to get this endorsement, you're most like, and you attended an out of state program, you're not going to have this. And so they have to go back and get this, and they get put into a provisional license because they don't have this. So we need to put that in 5, not here. So that's my bad, guys. But so this would stay the same if I'm correct on my thinking there.
So we'll just table that thought until we get down to 5 and look at it again.
Yeah, I see the language in 5C, Julie, on the tracker.
Okay, perfect. My bad, you guys. I'm getting too far ahead of myself. You can just see I'm ready for 3:30. So sorry about that. Okay. Well, at least we've got a preview of that conversation.
So Erica, do you still have your hand up, or put it down? All right, so then with that, if there's no other comments, were there any other comments about 413 through 418? Angela.
Thank you very much. So my only comment is this, as I think about who teaches school law, school finance, collective bargaining as it exists right now, and I know that we've just made some changes to what our campuses will do with that. I'm looking at D, and I was there at the table when we had the instance come forth by the one campus professor who teaches one of these courses. And I guess, as I thought more about this, I think what we have here is a part of our rule that really fits a super incredibly small part of a population. I mean, I think maybe 6, maybe 7 people in the whole state, and maybe one of them, like we saw it those 6 or 7 who teach the course, and maybe one of those would want to seek an administrator's license at some point. So I just wanted to raise that. I just think that there's language in there. I think it's intended to be helpful, but I also got to thinking, I think this is something that would certainly, as it did last Board of Public Ed meeting, fall into the realm of an unusual case and an unusual circumstance. And so I just wanted to elevate that and speak to that this afternoon.
Okay, so anybody want to second Angela's motion to take out D? And just if that is the case, that would come under an unusual case is what I hear her saying, because it is such an unusual circumstance.
I would second that.
Eric, okay, before I call on you, Eric, Angela, was it actually a motion to remove it or just were you commenting on it?
It could be. Let's see where the debate goes. Let's consider it as a motion. Yes.
Okay, so Sharon seconded that. Eric, go ahead.
Yes, just kind of a point of order. I believe Kirk Miller gave some public comment, and I'm trying to remember if it was in this specific area and if the redlining here kind of reflects the perspective that he brought forward at that time.
Eric, it does. It's the exact actually redlined version and words that were provided from that group. Okay. Where it says in C and that literally like the cross out of the 3 and then a Montana Educator Preparation Program that's in there. So I want to go back to Angela has proposed that we take D out and just leave that as a piece for an unusual case. And I think I heard a couple people say, yes, we could do that. Is that correct?
So Sharon said yes, I think. John, did you have something you wanted to weigh in on?
Yeah, both of those pieces. The redlining, I was on that committee with Kirk, and I think that does hit what we wanted to do, which was to take that credit requirement out and then allow colleges and universities the flexibility to create programs that best fit how they want to structure that. And the idea was, instead of having 3 different courses they take, maybe we could put this into one specialized course that people could take. I would support Angela's proposal. One of the things we talked about a few meetings ago was not to try to legislate every single case that comes up, rather to use that unusual cases for things that seemed like they were kind of out of the norm. So I think that's a fair proposal there. So I'd second her motion if that's where we're headed.
Okay. So Crystal, can you please take that out if you would, D, please, and then just renumber that D, E, F below. We'll make a move to do that.
Sharon, did you want to chime in quickly?
Yeah, I thank you, John, for the clarification, and Angela also. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't going against a previous. It was our hope that committee's recommendation was taken in full, and it was just my hope that I didn't second something that earlier you guys talked about and wanted it in there. But you're good. Everybody's good with taking D out.
That's right. Eric spoke to, I think, Kirk in bringing the language in from something that came from one of the steering committees of the Educator Recruitment and Retention Task Force's work. And that part we want to keep, the combining of the courses as per the EPPs. But D was where I was making my motion, Sharon. So I hope that helps. And I think, I don't recall Kirk speaking at all to D. I do know that he spoke well to the changes to C here specifically. And that was a direct result of that body of work that John spoke to and was a part of.
Okay, so let's confirm discussion around taking out D, the language about instructing a course counting toward it, since it's such a outlier case that happens. Just say yes. When I call on you, say yes if you want to take it out, no if you want to leave it. Okay, yes means take it out, no means leave it. I'm going to go quickly through my pictures here. Nick.
Yes.
Mike.
Yes.
Angela, we know you're a yes because you made the motion. Jewel.
Yes.
Thank you. Erica.
Yes.
John, can you just reaffirm?
Yes.
Diane,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
Christine,
Yes.
Sharon,
Yes.
Dean,
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
and Val.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody. We have unanimous decision there. Okay, Julie, do you want to look at the package as a whole now? Our
Yes. And
Class
Julie,
3
just so,
licenses?
I'm sorry to interrupt everyone. I just wanted you to know I am updating. I'm just doing it on the tracker so that we can really keep consistent where I'm making the changes as we're doing it. So I think that's a better place. And then one more thing, I'm sorry, I am going to be having to head out here in a little bit for SISBAC. So Eric, if you want to take over what I'm doing in the tracker, that would be really helpful. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I just didn't want it to not, since I have to leave, I just wanted to be sure someone was doing any editing. Thank you.
Yep. I got it over here, Eric, if you got it on the tracker. Okay, you guys, so I put it in there so that we have it there. Okay, so I guess you guys, this is now taking a look at 414, 415, all the way down to 419. Is there anything else we'd like to talk before we make a recommendation on the whole of class 3 moving forward as we have it in red line as a task force, that this is what we would be recommending for class 3? I don't know who's controlling the screen there. Do you want to scroll back up to the top to give people a chance to kind of look at it as they scroll down? Thank you.
Eric, go ahead.
Yes, there's that little item in yellow highlight relating to the special education piece. I just wanted to clarify if we had addressed that or not, or if that was still.
Where am I at?
Oh, there in 419. Just wanted to see if it was still, if that was still yellow for a reason.
I don't think it is. I think it just points out that that was a change. It's the same change in all the others.
Okay.
Okay, so if there's no comment, we make it official. Okay, class 3 license, what is in red line, the vote is for the group to put it forward as a recommendation. Same process as before. Yes means simply that. Yes, put it forward. No means you're opposed to it. Nick, starting with you again.
Yes.
Mike.
Yes.
Angela.
Yes.
Jewel.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Sean.
Yes.
Diane.
Yes.
Thank you. Christine.
Yes.
Erica.
Yes.
Dean. Come back to Dean. Sharon.
Yes.
Heather.
Yes.
Dan.
Yes.
Val.
Yes.
Dean, are you with us? Did you step away? Dean may have stepped away. All right. Okay, Julie, we're now ready to look at 420 and 421.
Can I share my screen again so that I can share a few little notes about class 4 before we dig into it?
And Julie, before you do that, can I interrupt for just a second since I've got to get back on Ed Northwest here shortly. I just wanted to take a minute and express appreciation for the commitment each of you have made to this work that has extended for a good portion of time in the midst of school years being underway and lots of competing demands. Just that depth of commitment has been so deeply appreciated, and the work that you're doing is making a significant difference for our folks in the field that work so diligently to get those qualified teachers in their classrooms. So I just wanted to take a minute to say thank you to you today.
Thank you, Cheryl. Just a quick check. Are you guys seeing my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I just wanted to go back and confirm that some pieces around class 4, which is our CTE recommendations. And so from the OPI CTA team, they did want to share that they strongly support the recommendations around the apprenticeship program as the 4B component. They did appreciate and support the clarification of the EFA coursework that is not currently outlined in the class 4 around the mentorship and induction program. And they did say that the change from 10,000 to 5,000 hours was more in alignment with surrounding states and the requirements for class 4 licenses, and that they feel like the reduction better reflects the time for the internship and the advanced training program. They were curious on how we came up with the 5,000 hours around, you know, that notion of kind of like you guys, the 3 years experience and the mathematics that we did last time with the 5,000 divided by, 8 hours of full-time work a day, and then the 229 days in a work year. So I wanted to share that with you. They did have one other piece they wanted us to think about and consider, which was around the particular endorsements in 421, and it'll be under 421.4 when they get there. This is for 3 particular endorsements: health science, engineering, and computer coding. They said that they have found it difficult for the 80 hours of that blended learning professional development and had felt it should be dropped. And so that you will see it show up in 1057 421.4, A for health science under Roman numeral 2, B for engineering under Roman numeral 2, and D for computer coding. So, in terms of the 80 hours, we've talked about 60 hours seems to be the standard that we're using in other places. So that is a potential that I would propose to drop it from the 80 to the 60 as well, to be in alignment with what we have for others. So I'm going to close this out, but open it up for discussion before we jump into class 4. And then Jacob, you can share the red line, if you will, for class 4. So this is the point where we would be talking about you guys. Thank you, Jacob, for holding there, where you see little b, Roman numeral 2. It would be a conversation around what are we thinking? What's the task force recommendation about that 80 hours based upon the information that I shared?
Jewel?
I would say if that's their recommendation, that we remove it. We redline through each of those different areas.
Sharon, you had your hand up as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But it's a good thing we had this extra day to consider all those extra. I mean, this particular item here, it seems like it's a late introduction of a change, but particularly though, if that CTE arm of OPI is finding that difficult to do, we should certainly lower that to what was the suggestion, 60?
60 would be in alignment, Sharon, with what we've done for the other, professional development units. When we talk about the 60 equivalent to the 60 credits. So that's just a proposal I was making. I don't know if you guys feel that is dropping it down from 80 to 60.
Angela?
Thank you. Julie, can you point to, or do you know where folks are getting what they can get now in these areas and what it is looking like for them?
Yeah, it is, Angela, a lot of online professional development units that come through the hub, but also through outside state, like Arizona has a CTE platform for professional development. So it is through other mechanisms. It's kind of a variety, if you will. And so the group would like to kind of expand this idea of professional blended learning to incorporate micro-credentialing, professional development units that are taken, college courses that are taking, apprenticeship work in place of, PD in these particular areas. So they're kind of taking it, Angela, in a couple of different places right now. It's coming from work, it's coming from, hub courses, it's coming from professional development. That's generally speaking online. So I guess, can I reduce this, you guys? Is there a motion? Jacob, do you want to take up a motion to potentially reduce this for these three from 80 to 60?
I see Jules ready to do it.
I would make that motion.
Second.
Sharon seconded it. Okay, so reducing that from 80 to 60. Yes means you support it. No means you don't. Nick, go ahead. For some reason, you're stuck in the upper left corner.
Yes.
Mike. Mike got pulled away. Angela?
Yes.
And Jewel made the motion, so she's a yes. Sean?
Yes.
Diane?
Yes.
Come back to you, Mike. Yes means you want to reduce it to 60.
Yes.
Erica?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Christine?
Yes.
Dean? Dean is still stepped away. Sharon seconded the motion, so she's a yes. Heather?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
And Val?
Yes.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Is there anything else?
Go ahead, Jacob, sorry.
I'm gonna say, is there anything else in 420 or 21 class 4 that anyone wanted to discuss? Are there any of the red lines that people are opposed to? Okay, let's do this one. Let's do this one a little quicker then. Is there anybody opposed to sending forth what is in red line as a recommendation? Okay, thank you. I think we're good there, Julie.
To clarify,
424.
I was 420 and 421, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Now we're moving on to 424 through 432, class 5. And Julie, do you want to begin this discussion with our admin piece that we're bringing down from above?
I think let's just start maybe at the very, very top, because Jacob, I think we want to come back to the class 5, right, at 424 right there. I think that'd be a good place to start first of all, to ground us back to kind of what is the provisional license and what are these 3 different types. And then we can add that piece when we get there. That's what I would like to do. Okay, so looking at class 5 provisional license, we're looking at changing it from having 2, which is a 5 provisional license, and then a 5A to 3 types. Previously, a 5 was provisional for 3 years for you to complete an educated prep program to get your teaching credentials. And the 5A was a 1 year to provide folks time to, they had all the requirements met except for passing the praxis. Okay, so that's what was. Now this is what is, and that we would like to propose. And part of this, you guys, is due to adding the mentorship and induction into this has helped kind of create some of these layers, if you will. So when we look at class 5, we're looking at 3 types. The 5A, which would be valid for 2 years, similar to the 2A, which is valid for 2 years to complete the mentorship. The 5B, which is the same as what it's been, which is 3 years to complete that. And then the 5C would be 3 years to complete that, which is what it is currently. It's just not called out separately for reciprocity. So this is the difference between them. 5A would be issued to folks for their initial Montana educator license who hold a bachelor's degree, who have completed an educator preparation program, including their student teaching, but have not yet completed the mentorship and induction or the required praxis test. Because if we get somebody who applies from an EPP and they, from that smorgasbord, you guys, they didn't have, say, for potentially the option to complete a student portfolio, or they didn't pass the praxis, or they didn't have the GPA, this would be a provisional, which allows them to demonstrate their content knowledge via the praxis, because they're not going to go back to school and get a new GPA, and they're not going to go back and do a portfolio for their student teaching. But this allows them that provisional time for someone who needs to meet that requirement. They would have 2 years versus the 1 year now. And also it provides us that additional time that if someone does come in, applies for their standard 2A license, but for some reason doesn't maybe get a job or doesn't complete that mentorship in that 2 years, it does give us a way to give them a provisional to get that completed. So that's the 5A. The 5B is it would be issued to folks for the 3 years. It's not renewable and it may not be reinstated. It's a license issued to folks who do hold a bachelor's degree, but have not received teacher credentials. So this is very similar to how it is now. And so that is already issued for folks for a class 5 for a teaching license of a class 1 or 2. It's available for a class 3 administrative license, as well as for a specialist license for a class 6. It is not available for our class 4 CTE, our class 7 tribal languages, or our 8 around dual enrollment. That is current rule. So this is pretty much, you guys, the same thing as before. It's just saying that this provisional is for 3 years as we've had it to get your credentials, meaning you can hold this license while you're in a classroom teaching and be obtaining your credentials while you're doing that, and you have 3 years to do that, but it is not renewable. So if you don't get it done in those 3 years, then I guess that's it. So 5C, a fue, as they say in Spanish. 5C is, you guys, it's just outlining that recency credit, which means that you are seeking a Montana license. You already hold a license from another state, but your license is expired and you do not have current professional development units. And so you need some time to get up to speed into some current educational components. So you're given time because you hold that license, but it's expired, for you to get some new credits, 60 professional development units. It could be PD, it could be the 6 credits that you need to get done. And so you're given that time frame to complete that. And to do that, you have to sign and put on file a plan of intent that you're going to go through and do that. Oh, this is a place where I see we didn't fix that language consistent what we had it in other place. Sorry, you guys, just noticing this. No, I think we're good. Sorry. To obtain. Okay, so we changed this, you guys remember, it was 60 professional development units, meaning it's a combo and or it could be semester credit, could be just professional development. Sorry about that. Okay. An applicant for a 5A, 5B, or 5C must provide verification. And this is current, you guys, that they do have a Montana address or a job offer from an accredited P12 school in Montana in order to get that provisional license. You have to complete the EFA course. The 5A, 5B, 5C is not eligible for the internship. That's a different piece. And that's what we have there for all of the 5. So when we look at it overall, it's aligning with our 2A and our 2B, and it's a provisional to provide 2 years if you don't have the test, or 2 years if for some reason you don't complete the mentorship under the 5A. The 5B is kind of what we've always had in place, you guys. It's somebody who has a bachelor's degree but needs to get their teaching credentials or their educator administrative credentials, I should say. And then the 5C is for recency. Okay, moving down, Jacob, to 425, and then we can open it up to discussion. In order to get a provisional license, just like our class 1, 2, you got to have an endorsement on your license. So these are the endorsable areas for a 5A, a 5B, and a 5C. They're appropriate, the grade level endorsements of which you've completed your EPP or you're planning to complete with your plan of study. And it's within the areas of the different grade bands that we have: P3, K8, 4-8, secondary, which is content specific, and K12 for special education. The rest of the language holds true. You got to have a bachelor's degree. You have to have a plan of study. If you're going to complete an educator prep program and don't have that completed for the 5B, you must meet it within 5 years. And you must be able to show that, you must be able to complete that in 3 years for your plan of study, and also that you meet admission requirements. So when you go to put in a plan of study now, you guys, that's what happens. An educator may pick up APP that they're going to attend to get those credentials completed, and they have to sign a plan of study, and they have to get a school to also verify that, yes, indeed, they could complete it in that 3-year time frame, and they do meet the admission requirements, and that has to be put on file in order for it to be issued. What we did here with 425 is very similar to what we did in the administrative, where we took the 426 for the secondary and the K12 and moved it up into just being one overall, and condensed and kind of reduced the amount of language. So you'll see 426 included up here. Keep going, Jacob.
Before we leave this, Julie, do you need clarification between A and B here that B is only relevant to the 5 B license? Is that
Let me
right?
see.
Yes.
I can't, you're moving, I can't find.
Hang on, I just want to make sure I'm right. So right here. So this language is only relevant to the 5B.
Yeah. Yeah. But that would be for applicants who have not completed an educator prep program.
Right. Okay. Then
It's fine. Mhm.
going down to 427.
Mhm. So the superintendent endorsement, you guys, this is a class 5 for a superintendent. So we've got class 5 for a teacher at a 1 and a 2. This is for the superintendent. It aligns with what we have by including the school counseling, the 3 years of experience that they, and it's for applicants who have not completed the Montana Educator Preparation Program requirements for school law, school finance, and collective bargaining and employment law. So this is that piece, if you guys wanted to consider, these applicants are required to complete those programs. If they have not done that, then they can be given a 5 to go ahead and do that. If they have completed the Montana Ed Prep requirements, other than the school law and collective bargaining and school finance, they're not eligible for the 5, but may enroll in the internship program. And that's similar to how we have it now, you guys. So I guess this is the point at which that conversation would be helpful as to what you guys are thinking and would like to recommend there.
So would there be ripple effects? Would you have to change the language around Montana Educator Preparation Program requirements, or would
Yeah,
it?
we would have to leave that and, because right now that aligns with what we had up above, which is that you go to get that completed at the university, if you will. So the question is, do we want to propose adding another pathway to complete that through professional development? Or do we want to leave it just as getting it completed with the prep program requirements? Anybody?
Sharon.
Yeah, I would say leave as is. I understand what you're saying, but I think I also heard Erica express concern about coursework. Perhaps could be a more robust training than professional development units, but maybe I misinterpreted that. If somebody else could speak to that, that'd be great.
Erica.
I think Sharon stated my concerns very, very, very well. I think that as a superintendent, it's important that we have that coursework and have very, I guess, clear guidelines in that coursework. So yes, I agree with Sharon.
And John, what I hear from the conversation and what led to this was that there's a strong possibility that this is a course that covers all 3 potentially. Is that correct?
I think that there was a hope that changing that language would allow for streamlining of how those courses were offered. Yeah, that's what I recall from that conversation. Thanks, Jacob.
So we have comments in favor of not changing it. Anybody have a alternative opinion?
Okay. All right, you guys, moving then to, I'm gonna move on if that's okay, 1057, 428. Again, you guys, very similar to what we just did up above for the class 3. We've taken and condensed this to be the principal endorsement and then added it in as elementary, secondary, and K-12 there.
Sorry, Julie, can I just interrupt real quick? So the item that was just discussed, since I'm getting ready to help Crystal with the markup. So what was just decided in regards to the PD, or was it tabled?
Nothing changes, staying the same.
Nothing
Okay.
changes to what we have here, Eric.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so 429's been rolled up and 430's been rolled up as we did in the others. These are all the same in terms of what we've talked about up in the administrative license. It's just now applied, if you will, into the provisionals.
Okay, I'm gonna scroll back up to the top and scroll down again so everybody can see it, kind of looking at it all at once, and then we can determine on the full set of provisional rules. So if there's somewhere where anybody needs me to slow my scroll for any reason, got some hands up. Jewel?
I just have a question. Would you, okay, right there at the top, are you going to leave those in that order? Class 5B, then A, then C? Because as you go down, you put them A, B, and then C. Just a logistical question.
I noticed that too, Jewel, and it was bothering me. Thanks for bringing it up.
Yeah, we definitely, I think the A needs to go with the A and the B needs to go with the B and the C so that they're all aligned, Jewel. And it's like we did it up front, but we didn't do it below. You're correct.
Christine?
Did we decide on putting in both mentorship and induction? I saw that was in there. I'm not sure if this is the exact spot under the 5A little I. There's a couple spots there. Yeah, I see the and. Did we mean to have the and?
I think it's meant to be one thing. How did we, let me run up to the top and see how we phrased it. So we did have mentorship and induction here. I think the understanding is that it is a singular thing, not two separate entities, because it's a program. How do we, Julie, do you know off the top of your head how we have it defined in 102?
Yeah, I think that was probably where we would want to have that discussion, is probably jumping when we get done here, when we go over to class 1, not class 1. Oh my goodness, you guys. Subchapter 1 is taking a look at how it's defined as mentorship and induction. Because I think we've been describing it, Jacob, as one program, but I think Christine brings up a good point. You know, Is it both of those terms? Is it just mentorship program? Do we want to call it mentorship and induction? Just so that we really define that well.
Yeah, so Christine, I don't think it impacts what we're doing right now. That's an adjustment we can make depending upon what the final definition looks like, just to make sure it aligns. I think I was in this general vicinity here scrolling. We're going to zip through these. We can bind them. And that's it. If nobody saw anything, I'll just ask for a quick motion that we move forward with the Class 5 rules as a recommendation as they are.
I'll move, we move forward with the Class 5 recommendations as they are.
Okay, that's Erica giving the motion.
I'll second that. This is Dan.
Dan seconds it. Anybody opposed? All right, rack another one. Eric, you have your hand up.
Yes, just clarifying. So the package that was approved is all of the Class 5 sections.
Yes.
Okay.
.424 through 432.
Thank you.
Okay, that's all of Chapter 4. Moving to Chapter 3. Julie, Chapter 3.
I am here. I was trying to sneak a little lunch in. To be honest. I am here, you guys. So, all right. I don't know that we've really spent much time on this, so I want to kind of just give us some time to really even discuss it. But currently, right, the way that it's written for endorsement information is that the only endorsements that can be added for a teaching, administrative, and special license are those that are approved by the Board of Public Ed. And those are outlined as to the ones that we have. And that they would be granted currently by completing a program of study as verified by a college official. So that means if you have an endorsement, you want to add an endorsement, the only way for you currently to add an endorsement is to complete a program of study at a school for that endorsement and complete those college credits and for the university to sign off on them. So we're looking at proposing for you all to consider, is there maybe another way that somebody could add an additional endorsement if they already have one? So, and this would be for secondary teachers that is content specific. So areas for endorsement on a Class 2 license include these ones here. And so you could get that by, you guys, proof of a minimum passing score on the praxis applicable to the requested endorsement as established by the Board of Public Ed, or hold a national board teaching standard equivalent to what this endorsement is. the recommendation for the endorsement from the official, or you must hold a degree higher, a bachelor's degree or higher as well. So we were looking at, could someone who already holds, for example, an endorsement in I don't know, I'll go biology, and want to then add an endorsement for chemistry, could they, instead of going and taking a college course to get that endorsement, have that signed off right by the official, could they take a praxis exam in order to do that?
Sharon has expressed she's not in favor of that. Dan?
I must say that I am in love with that idea. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Julie. Oftentimes when you are in a small school system and you can, and you find someone who maybe came from another state that does have that biology, and they need to have that a broader sense for your offerings in that high school, whether it be a general science or not, a broad field, excuse me. I think it's very good to have that pathway there to make it easier. They already know how to teach. They've already been through the content. If they can prove that they have the content knowledge by taking the praxis, that's why I like that. Good job.
Sharon?
Well, I put that in the chat, so you already know how I feel about that. So I heartily disagree with an endorsement by praxis. And of course, I was a high school English endorsed and math endorsed teacher. But so I think I speak from some perspective with regard to that. I do have a question for John, please. I know that has always been a recommendation for the endorsement from the appropriate official from an accredited professional program. Would your program look at someone endorsed in biology and be able to recommend them for endorsement in, let's just say, chemistry, by looking at their transcript and perhaps granting them that endorsement with less than a minor in that subject area?
Can I respond to that, Jacob?
You can, and just flow with whatever you wanted to say after that too.
All right. I'm probably going to be a jumbled mess because I had something I was really excited to get out. So if we look at someone who has a biology and wants to add the chemistry, it's really going to depend on what chemistry they had in that biology degree and how that compares to what is required in the program. So those would be based off of an individual review. And I don't have a good sense of, could it possibly be done without a minor? I think we tend to look at the courses and do they meet the standards that we're supposed to meet? Typically that would be difficult, I think, without a minor level coursework. Not to say it couldn't be done, because anytime I say something can't be done, someone will prove me wrong. So it's unlikely, but maybe could happen. And I don't know if she had something she want to finish on that, or if I should just go.
No, that answers that.
So I wanted to point out a couple of things. So one is we have in here towards the bottom, National Board for Professional Teaching Standards. In order to get that certification from National Board, you actually have to hold the license already. So I don't think that would be a case where someone would come up with National Board and then we would give them that endorsement based on the National Board. Because you'd have to have the license to get the National Board. Does that make sense?
So John, you're saying take that piece out.
Yeah.
Okay. Is anyone opposed to me doing that?
And then I would support what Sharon had to say, that from our perspective, we would oppose this. Our faculty and staff at the university level, we believe that kids deserve fully prepared teachers, and passing a praxis is not fully preparing people. It is showing that they can pass a test. And for us, we really believe that kids need teachers that have content expertise. I might be able to go along with Dan a little bit in the science, and maybe even, history to government. There might be some overlap in those where you probably could do that, where you have a good foundation already. But to take somebody that has an English and put them into an agriculture class, that's very troubling. Agriculture, family consumer science, all of our sciences, they have lab safety courses specifically built into those to keep kids safe. And to take somebody that has no experience in those labs, has no preparation or training, that seems like a recipe for disaster. So there might be a few areas I think that we could probably have some wiggle room on. Again, biology to chemistry, physics to chemistry, those have similar content areas. But when we're starting to go from one field to another field, we really think kids deserve fully prepared teachers.
Christine?
Okay, I just had a clarification question and then a comment. So about the national boards, if somebody comes in from another state with a national board certification, will it match up directly with our endorsements? Or I question that. I just wonder about that. Okay. And then my comment has to do with the fact that these people are already teachers. They have been granted a teaching license. So now what we're really asking is, do they know the content knowledge? And isn't that what the praxis test is supposed to tell us? If they have the content knowledge. And then my third comment from personal experience is, and I don't see it up here, the K-8 endorsement is not listed there. And I've had teachers who had a specific content endorsement, science, broad field, but they're teaching science in the middle school and they have to go back and get their K-8 endorsement because I would like them to also teach math, or they'd have to get the math endorsement. And I'm wondering if they could take a test, say for math, to get the math endorsement that would also work for them, or do the K-8 endorsement. I'm just wondering how those scenarios might play.
Julie, can you respond to that? And then Angela will come to you.
So I think you had a couple of different points there. You were asking about, so I hear you saying that, and adding that these are folks who already have a teaching degree, have attended an EPP. It's asking them to expand on the content that they can teach. So I think that was a point that you were making. The second piece was around the national board, which is if somebody gets a national board certificate in an endorsement area, will it match up? We did address that in one of the other rules, because there are some that don't necessarily go to point, but we talked about it being equivalent to what is in Montana if you get that in the national board. That is in a few minor areas. And then I think your third point was around, this is written right now just for secondary teachers. What happens for a K-8 teacher who's elementary endorsed that may have an additional endorsement in some other, or like if it's a 512 teacher that has an endorsement in a content specific, could they get the elementary? And so you're bringing up a point around what is it when we're talking about different levels versus just different content. So that's almost like it's almost two questions there, because we're talking about, can you add another content when you're already a teacher? But the second piece that you're bringing up is now, if you have a different level, Like say you're a 4-8 middle school, can you get the K-8 or the 5-12? So this is not in particular to levels as much as it is to content specific. So I think you bring up another point for the group to consider. That's what I heard, Jacob.
Angela?
Thank you very much. I too am opposed to the endorsement by praxis, as Sharon put it, but I would support getting rid of the or and just keeping the and here. And then I think that gets us to a place maybe that John was alluding to where EPPs can look at transcripts, look at praxis, and also gauge circumstances individually, perhaps.
Dan?
So from the smaller school perspective, however, this really is a problem that lies in chapter 55 and maybe not necessarily in 57, but there's so much, play over. Right now, and we're heading into even a worse time where we're just looking for somebody to teach our kids. And the more difficult we make it by, separating things out, it's just going to make it more difficult for smaller schools to exist and to provide the education that's necessary. So I would just, I like the language that's there. I like the idea that's there. It helps out. We have 7 AA districts in the state comprising whatever percentage of students, it's rather high. But then we have 420 whatever non-AA districts that all, fail to meet accreditation because they can't get teachers endorsed in another area. And so, I like the way this is been approached.
Diane?
Thank you. I'm going to go back to national board certification for a moment. And I think I should have spoke to this earlier, but what I would like to preserve is the ability to have national board certification looked at for the potential of endorsement, particularly when the age ranges for national board certification don't exactly align with the ranges that we offer in licensure, but that national board certification be considered even if the age ranges are slightly off our areas of endorsement. I think our national board certified teachers are exceptional, and they may have backgrounds that would lend, and in practice that would lend to perhaps giving them an opportunity to use national board certification to match up with, or even if they don't exactly align with the ranges of certification that we have in Montana. So I guess I would like maybe Dr. Merkel or someone else to comment on that to see if that would, or even John, if they would.
Yeah, I fully support national board and using it, and it's terrific. And a lot of people go through a lot of work to get those national boards. You can't get national board certification without a license. So to say we're going to give someone a license based on national boards doesn't make sense, because you have to have that license to get national board certified. So it's creating a situation in our law that doesn't happen. You don't go get national board certification and then come back and say, now I'm going to get a license. It's the other way around. So I think that's where we were talking about national board certification for out-of-state teachers coming in. Makes great sense. Give them lots of credit, give them lots of wiggle room, take away other things that they have to do. But to say that you can get an endorsement with it, that's just where it becomes problematic, because you can't get national board certification if you don't have the endorsement already.
The question that I think is lingering in people's minds around this is, if someone comes with national board, does the licensing authority have the ability to, the flexibility to determine what endorsement that fits best in Montana, because we know they don't align directly. Does that exist if it's not stated here? I think this is speaking specifically to the endorsement. So I think that's what we're talking around, is that specific piece, not necessarily getting the license.
Jacob, what you're talking about is in 1057-411 for a class 1, which we've already addressed. It's different to adding an endorsement.
Yeah. So what happens is they get their endorsement when they get their license. They won't need to add one.
Correct.
Heather.
Thank you. I just want to support what Dan shared earlier. Being a superintendent in a small district, we really need people to be multi-endorsed to be able to offer our students a well-rounded education. And I think if allowing them to prove their proficiency with the praxis or these other things is or would be very beneficial to our schools and our school communities and the offerings that we could provide for them. I think nobody's going to elect to take the praxis if they don't feel really competent in those areas already.
We've also had some situations, you guys, with and adding to the conversation here with the Broadfield Science and the Broadfield Social Studies, where we have somebody who's come from out of state and has an endorsement in, say, biology, and they come to Montana and they're only able to get the biology endorsement. And they end up in a school where they're being asked to teach Broadfield Science, if you will, and they can't do that unless they go back to school to get the broad field to teach all that, even though they may have that background where they have the sciences, they have the chemistry, they have the other areas. And so we've seen it happen, for example, where someone might come in and they have a history degree and the endorsements in history, that's the only class they can teach. And so the only way for them to be able to teach the other courses in a high school, and we don't have very many locations in Montana where you just teach history at a high school and that's it. And so it requires them for them to go back to school to get that endorsement, even though they may have taught in they many a times have taught the other courses as well. So I just share that with you.
Just had something in the chat I'm looking at here. Everybody wants to look at it from Sharon. Someone was going to talk. Go ahead.
This is Diane. I'm just sharing with the group the National Board Certification and how when they are granted in specific age ranges, that might vary from how we would typically award grade levels. And so I just want, and I am hoping that Julie could respond to this. When you're looking at National Board Certified candidates and all coming in, how much deference is given to that age range when you're considering grade ranges for Nationally Board Certified teachers wanting to become licensed, or someone that achieved National Board Certification during the term of their license and wants to seek a different license or endorsement?
So Diane, I think it's a really good question. So I just pulled up your document because I wanted to take a look at it. So when you look at what they've put here, they talk about, for example, ages. So they're talking about an 11-year-old to a 15-year-old, for example, and a 14-year-old to an 18-year-old. And so if they come in with an endorsement for mathematics, for example, for 11-year-olds, that's kind of like the grade 5, if you will. And so that goes, so they would be getting a grade 5 up through 12, if you would, in Montana, right? And so we kind of already kind of convert those age ranges, Diane, to what level their national board is in. Where it gets kind of weird on the content, for example, is if you look at reading, language arts for early and middle childhood, right? So that's different than reading, if you will, endorsement for overall for like a K8. And so those just kind of get specific to say, okay, where does that person land then? Do they get it for the literacy for the early childhood and middle childhood, not just a reading endorsement overall? So we kind of already, Diane, have to look at that. And that's why we wanted to clean up language, which we did in 411, to kind of say, if you are nationally board and you have an endorsement in one of these areas, we're gonna issue it to you where it's most equivalent to what we offer in Montana. I don't know if I'm making sense.
Yes, in general, you're making sense. I just want to be sure that the latitude is used and that nationally board certified teachers have, I guess, an inroad that works for them to get the proper endorsement in Montana using the information from their national board work.
Yeah.
To the maximum extent you can. Thanks.
You're welcome, Diane. And it is weird when it talks about age ranges, like when we're 3 years old to 8 years old, that's like a K3. And we don't have like necessarily just K, we have P3. Well, that's P3, right? And then 7-12 is really your, basically it's like 4 to 8, isn't it? I have to, doing math in my head of 8 years old to converting to grade levels these days. Okay, so yeah, thanks, Diane. And that is in there. And we did look at that so that they do get that endorsement that is equivalent to what we offer here in Montana, if you're nationally board certified. And that's over in the professional license.
Thank you for the assurance. I just wanted to be sure.
Yeah. So are you guys okay if I go back to what John said? Like basically if you are already nationally board, you're going to get that endorsement in an area you're already endorsed in. So it's not like you can go get a national board certificate if you hold it in math, in science, if you don't already have science. Correct, John?
Yes, correct.
Okay. So I think that means then that we should probably take this out. So the question becomes, I think what the discussion is, you guys, is around this yellow part. So can someone add an endorsement if they're already licensed by taking the praxis, or do they have to go and get the appropriate official from an accredited preparation program? Do they need the practice and that? Can they do one or the other? And then there's the, or if you hold a bachelor's degree already in that endorsement, a higher degree in like biology, and you go to add that, you wouldn't need the preparation program or the praxis.
Sharon had her hand up. Sharon.
Thank you. Two things. One of them is back towards higher ed. And John, you made the great point that you're not really, the university system doesn't necessarily allow you to put an endorsement there unless they have that minor. And I think maybe my question is for EPPs out there, like, does changing this language and putting the word "and" in there provide the EPPs flexibility to do that? I think my other point might be that we earlier heard messages from OPI that they thought the praxis wasn't really very reliable or valid. And I think that we've provided alternatives now for that pathway that do include the praxis. But I guess I'm still struggling with why would we hinge so much on a praxis when in other parts of this language, we didn't really like it. Anyway, you know that I hardly disagree with endorsement by praxis, and there won't, and I am from a small school. But I guess my question still lies with the EPPs. Is it possible for an EPP to give an endorsement currently without a minor? Or is that a conversation piece, Angela, that still needs to be had with the MUS?
So let me jump in real quick, Sharon, to speak to the nuance around the praxis. I think the discussion earlier was tied to initial licensing and the idea that the praxis is not a strong correlator to teacher quality. In this case, you would have teachers who are in place, local districts would be making a quality decision. The determination here would be, is it a measure of content knowledge, which I think it is a much stronger measure of than teacher quality as a construct. So the demonstration here would be districts believe in the quality of the educator because they're already licensed. The content knowledge needs to be determined. That's the nuance of the conversation, I think, as to why praxis potentially could be applicable here. That's not a discussion in support either way or the other, but just an explanation of the nuance. Then the question was put out in terms of, I guess, what does it take to get an endorsement now? What does it take for an EPP? What is the criteria to grant an endorsement?
Well, we're looking at chapter 58 and the requirements that are spelled out that we have to meet. And then we look at the transcripts that someone would bring in. In this instance, if someone had a license in one area, we would be looking through that preparation and trying to see where we could evidence that they had met standards in the new licensure area. And then we would be identifying anything that was left, and then we'd build a program around that. So it's, again, I think it's unlikely they want to have equivalent of a minor in the new field. You might get into some that would be have a little bit more overlap, where maybe we could give more credit, particularly when you get into the sciences and you're cross-referencing and looking at those different pieces. But when you get into, if you're moving those from an AGAD into an English, there might not be that strong correlation between the two, and so it might have more. So we're really looking at how do they meet the standards in 58. They'll have to have their praxis, and then we're generally, if they have little to no teaching experience, we're having them do some kind of a field experience, supervised field experience. And that's one thing here that I guess I don't see is, does this mean that all of our 22-year-olds who are coming through right now that are getting, I've got one right now that's doing ag ed and element, well, that's not a good example, a chemistry and a physics. So could we just have them do the chemistry and then just pass the praxis on the physics and get the physics at the same time? So there's no differentiator here that says if they have teaching experience, if they, those kinds of things. So the way I read this right now is we no longer have to have our students complete that second endorsement as well. They can just take the praxis and get that when they graduate.
So I think we're kind of, any more thoughts or conversations about it? I hear almost like John mentioning, and I don't know, John, clarify for me, but I hear somewhat of us hearing some folks saying, I think that folks should be able to add an endorsement via praxis. I hear folks say, no, you can't do it via praxis. You need to get You need to get the appropriate endorsement from the EPP. And then, John, I hear you saying though, but maybe there are some that you shouldn't be able to just take the praxis for and get that, but maybe there are some that are kind of close that it could be, that are kind of within some of the same arena, like the broad field science or the broad field social studies. So I hear you almost alluding to potentially a third way. I heard you kind of say, well, it wouldn't be good to be talking about the egg to the K8, if you will, because that's a pretty big difference. But maybe somebody who's got the physics, chemistry, biology combo, you know, for them, you're just going to tell them, go get the broad field, right? Because then you can teach it all. But for the folks that maybe don't come in with an EPP with the broad field, they're very limited in terms of how they could add that endorsement. So I almost hear you suggesting a third thing, but I could be wrong.
I'm hesitant to add anything new at this point, because we have, you know, covered a lot of ground. But I think if you look at those content areas, there are content areas that align more closely, and they have a lot of similar coursework built into them. And so that is the sciences. It is in the social studies, broad field, the history, and the government. There are programs that really naturally would align. I haven't spoken to my colleagues about whether that would be a viable third option. So I'm speaking as a lone wolf here. That I think there are some areas that could be reviewed and might likely have that kind of connection where they could do that.
Okay, so
Dan has Julie, Dan just put his hand up.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, sorry, Julie. So, and I guess we could look at it another way too, is that we have all of our class 4, you know, certifications that we can do, which doesn't require anything from the university anyway. It just requires time out in the workforce, the 5,000 hours that we just agreed to, or whatever, right? So, I mean, you know, saying that you really need to have the college credit or things like that. I mean, we've already found ways around that. I think we could exploit that a little bit more through that class 4 pathway, if that really is, you know, important. But I just, you know, struggling, I would make a motion to remove and leave the or from the red line.
Okay. Nick?
Nick, go ahead.
Nick, were you going to say something?
I apologize. I second that motion.
Oh. Okay, so Jacob, over to you.
Okay, well, we want to see where we stand on it then. Essentially just get a pulse of the group. The motion is to leave it as is and remove the and.
So it would be or.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's yeah. Okay. So just read or. So you'd have either one of those things would grant you to obtain the endorsement. All right. Well, let's vote. We'll vote out loud on this one. Just see where we are. Julie or someone, can you remove the word and so we can see what it looks like, and then we'll be voting on the language that'll be in front of us. Yes will be to keep it. No will be not to keep it as it is in front of you. Right. So yes is keep it as it is on the screen. No is no. You don't like it. All right. Here we go. Nick.
Yes.
Angela.
No.
John.
No.
Diane.
No.
Dean.
No.
Jewel.
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Erica,
No.
Christine, come back to Christine. Heather,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Val,
Yes.
and Sharon. Sharon
No.
and Christine, are you back with us? She may have said in the chat she had to step away. Tristan, what's our count?
6 no's, 6 yeses.
That seems right, doesn't it?
I'm sorry, I might have miscount. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 yeses.
Yeah. Well, Julie, what if we move on to our other chapters that we need to wrap up and then see where we are with this one?
Well, I think then that what this really does is it says we could move that forward. That says this is a draw. The group doesn't necessarily recommend it, and they don't not recommend it. They're not recommending it. They're not recommending it. So it's kind of a draw. And even if Christine came back on, you guys, that would be 7 out of 13, right? If I'm adding my math right, that still doesn't put us at our 60%. So we could kind of leave it there. I mean, we can go look at the other stuff, but we're at a draw. And I think that's what we say. We're at a draw. There's reasons to why they don't think. I think we've heard the group kind of capture the reasons not to, and we've heard some of them capture the reasons why, and we could do that. Okay, I'd like to recommend, Mike's gonna say, be right back. I would like to recommend really quick, you guys, a 7-8 minute break if that's possible, to come back at 3, and then we'll head into definitions in 1 and into 2. And then I guess maybe we can come back to this conversation about 3. Angela, we finished up class 8 last week. We weren't making any changes. We proposed to leave it as it was.
We just circle on. I had to get off last week. Is there any way that we could circle back to it today? I think what I have, I think will be of interest to folks.
Yeah, if we have time. Otherwise, we did kind of just recommend leaving it the way that it was. But I do propose to take you guys just a really quick minute, a few minute break if we can, and come back on at 3, Angela, and I'll put that at the end. Get a background check. And so the question was, did we want to consider adding background checks to be something more frequent that gets done rather than just one time in terms of the life of a license? At the point of renewal, at the point of every other renewal, 5 years, 10 years, or not at all. So that's one piece of discussion there. And then when we start looking at 215 and going down through to, it's like 16 to 17, what's happening in 215, 16, and 17 is updating that language to go along with the piece where we talked about that for recency that you could do professional development activities. And so when you look at the professional development activities, it would need to be a total of 60. It could be 1 unit for professional development per hour, which is what we currently have. 1/4 of college credit equals 10, and 1 semester college credit equals 15. And so when we looked at this, it was saying, okay, we want to open up that it's not just for renewing, but rather also to add in the professional development. And so to come up with one word that would cover that both, which was professional development. And so that's what you will see through 215 through 216 through 17. When I did talk to our folks here at the OPI, in the renewal unit world and the real unit provider world, they said that they felt that the word professional development did capture it and would be a good umbrella term to cover both of those pieces. Then in terms of, we had two pieces down here that we wanted to add and talk about. This came from the feedback group of talking about reciprocity for military spouses who hold a current out-of-state license, and that is current, that they could get reciprocity for that license in the state of Montana. If they can prove that they have a spouse, an active duty member of the U.S. Armed Forces and has been transferred to Montana or being scheduled to transfer to Montana, or has moved here permanently as or a change of station basis. And so that's 1057-221. And then 1057-222 is about that definition from chapter 1, which was this language about the superintendent has discretion to deny licensure consistent with rules if the standards for an EPP are not substantially equivalent to or greater than the standards required in Montana, subject to the approval of the Board of Public Ed upon appeal or denial. And so we thought this might be the place where that would land, that we didn't feel it really was part of a definition, if you will. So I open up the conversation. We can go back all the way to the top about criminal history background around frequency. Do we want to leave it as it is, that it's just an initial point of licensure? Do we want to consider that at some point in the lifespan of licenses being renewed, that we would want educators to get an additional background check?
Sharon.
I would be opposed to this notion, I guess, not just I guess, but I would be opposed to adding another background check for Montana licensees seeking renewal, primarily because another bottleneck in keeping teachers in the classroom would be, so you do that when they renew, and what happens to a district whose teacher did not seek that background check at this time, then does that teacher then not, do those teachers who didn't get their background check filled and completed by August, would that then cause them to not be able to begin the teaching year? Because of course, at that point, they're not fully licensed. The second part of that is, I guess if a district would like to adopt that as a policy, perhaps MTSBA could propose policy like that. Perhaps an individual district then could adopt that as a policy on their own, and that leaves that totally as local control for license renewals with the district. Thank you.
John.
I'm just asking for some clarification. So right now, if a currently licensed teacher receives some type of a situation that would lead to them losing their license, how does that get reported? You know, I believe that's the administrator would submit a complaint. Our teacher has gotten a felony or what have you. I guess I'm so coming from, you know, different hats that I've worn in the past. This has always been one of those sticky wickets for me, because the people who typically get in trouble aren't the ones who are going to raise their hand and say, hey, I got in trouble for this. And then what happens if a district doesn't report something, that they maybe just release a teacher, but they don't make a recommendation against their license? And the front end of licensing, we're very protective. Our students have at a minimum 2 background checks before they leave us, and then a 3rd when they go to OPI. So we know that they're coming in good shape. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is what is that process and what happens if a district chooses to release a teacher but not report them?
So John, good question. So what you're bringing up about disciplinary action against a license of a teacher, maybe that you report, that's in 1057-601, where a board of trustees could recommend action against a teacher's license to be suspended, revoked, or potentially license could be surrendered. So and so you can see that up there, right? Those are the pieces. So that does come from the Board of Trustees. If, John, say for example, currently in process, say a school board does not, they just non-renew them or the teacher moves on, right? And it isn't reported up and something happens. When a teacher, then say they go to another district, that's really a lot on the local control piece, right? Where we are hoping that teachers, you would be doing a background check before you hired somebody new to your district, which is where many of our districts use that local control. They go in there then, and they may even do reference checks before they hire somebody, but most of the time they don't offer a contract until they do a background check themselves. So it does sometimes then show up there, John. And many of our districts, and Jewel could probably speak to this, but the Montana School Board Association already does support policy around you do need to be doing background checks. And so that is something that's kind of already there. The second piece I would say, John, is if a teacher comes up for renewal, and maybe there's something on their license that the district doesn't even aware of, right? Every time you do a renewal, you also have to update your character and fitness form. And there are some questions on there that ask you, at the time of renewal, has there been any negative action taken against you for a current license that you hold? Meaning, has it been revoked or, any of that? Or if you've had any charges, have you been convicted of any charges? That's also on the character and fitness piece. So there is that form. Now, if that shows up and we see something at the time of renewal that someone has disclosed that something has happened, then we many times will go back before we issue the renewal to say we need to talk through that. So I hope that somewhat kind of answered, John, some of the questions that you have, meaning, do we have things in place already? And then to add to what Sharon said, is it necessary to do another one at this point in time?
Yeah, that's super helpful. And I was thinking along the lines of Sharon is this something that is already being done? It sounds like it is being done. I think the teachers who probably should check yes are not the most likely that will check yes on that box, but maybe that's a discussion for another day, because it sounds like there are multiple checks and multiple ways that we can accomplish the same thing.
Anyone else want to add anything to that? Diane?
Thank you. I'll be brief. There are multiple ways these cases are brought frequently and have been brought before the board. My thought would be this should be looked at more before we impose it, especially during this time when we are well behind on getting background checks for licensures anyway, and it could be a bottleneck. I understand some other states are looking at it, but as a part of a union that deals with circumstances such as this, I can tell you that with certainty that folks are not necessarily as opposed as you might think to reporting things that may come up and could be qualifying as the licensure application shows, and want to be in full disclosure of the potential that's out there. So I'm not saying that would happen each and every time, but I've seen candidates be very cautious to be sure that their licensure application discloses what it should. And so I would urge that we do more work on this, look into it further rather than jumping into it now. I want kids to be protected just as much as anyone else does. So thank you.
Crystal, go ahead.
Thanks. So I wanted to just bring up, this was something that we addressed at the feedback group way long ago. I can't even remember when. And it did come up and there was good conversation around it. And a suggestion from somebody in the feedback group would be to do the name-based fingerprint check instead of the full fingerprint check. So that means that if they're already in this Montana system with the DOJ in terms of having the fingerprints already done at the initial, then for a renewal that they could do a name-based check, which doesn't take the same amount of time or process. It can be done within the same day. So if something came up from when they did the original fingerprints to then when the renewal, if something happened in that time period, it would come up through the name-based check. So that was an option that was presented in the feedback group that I wanted to make sure was stated. Thank you.
Crystal, does that change the language here, or does that change something that has to be clarified in policy on OPI's side?
I wouldn't think, I mean, it's just saying any Montana licensee seeking renewal. So I think then we could put what kind of fingerprint, but I don't think it needs to be in rule. I do also want to say in part C, when I reviewed this with our legal, the wrong statute is cited, and that's the change. It's not changing anything, but the wrong one was listed from what's in rule right now. So there's an error in rule, and that's why that's like that. Thank you.
Okay, would anyone like to make a motion? Sharon, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'm not making a motion, but I mean, I know you'd said name-based, Crystal, but that number 2 says fingerprint-based. So could you clarify that? Those are two different things, I think.
And I guess that's what Jacob was meaning in terms of, do we need to write it differently? Which then I guess it would be yes. It was just showing another option. Let me pull up the DOJ's website, because honestly, when we were having that feedback group conversation, somebody pulled it up.
Yeah.
Go ahead. What?
Fingerprint based is slower. So
yeah.
that's,
Oh yeah. No, I certainly know that as
yeah.
So this is more of a this is a more like it can be done. I think it's more inexpensive and also can be done within the same day or something. I know it says it. Let me pull it up if you want to continue the conversation, Nick, and then I can come back to that with a little more information.
I was going to go ahead and make the motion that we remove 2.D, any Montana license seeking renewal from the red line copy.
Nick, did you put your hand up again? Anybody want to second his motion?
I'll second the motion. Erica?
Okay. Let's just go ahead and vote on it to move it along quicker here. So the vote is yes to remove the language that's in red, no to keep it. All right, so yes, remove, no, keep. Nick made the motion. We know he's a yes. Angela. But
Yes.
I'm sorry, Angela.
Yes.
Yes, remove. Mike.
Yes.
Diane.
Yes.
McCall, are you up to speed?
I am on this point, so yes.
Okay. John.
Yes.
Jewel.
Yes.
Erica second the motion, so she's a yes. Christine? Christine is still away. Heather?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Val?
Yes.
And Sharon?
Yes.
All right. Sounds like the group would just like to remove the language from being a recommendation.
Okay, thanks, Jacob. Okay, so moving on to you guys to 215, 216, and 217 and 18. I'm sorry, you guys. I'm just like, wait, how long does this go? expanding the word renewal to also be professional development so that it encompasses both renewal and the professional development units.
Nick,
I'd make a motion that we replace the word renewal with the words professional development in 15, 16, 17, and 18.
all righty. We have a second for that.
I'll second that. This is Mike.
Mike seconds that. I think we can do a quick vote here. Is anybody opposed to that? Okay, that motion passes. And then we're looking at the military spouse language, and then let's just wrap it up with the sort of clarification of definition that's there around program verification. Is there any comment about those? We didn't really have any discussion time. McCall.
Thanks, Jacob. I just have a quick question on this one. So I understand so I think the intent is to say that anyone who is a military spouse coming from another state who has an active license, they should get a license in Montana. But I don't think that that's actually what the language says. And please correct me if I'm wrong. I just maybe asking the question that if it says that it has to be equivalent to or greater than the standards required in Montana, wouldn't that mean that they just have to apply for a license like any other person would be coming to the state from out of state? I guess I'm just asking for a clarification because to me, it doesn't necessarily seem like reciprocity.
McCall, this is Julie. I'm looking at it. Just one second here.
I can see McCall's issue in the fact that it says that is equivalent to or greater than the standards required in Montana. I mean, what? So does that mean that the people at the OPI have to find out what the standards were in the state where they received their license first?
Okay. Yep, I think you're spot on, you guys. So the notion then would be, so I'm trying to think of somebody that has been in this situation. Okay, so if they come, they have an out-of-state license, they have less than 3 years of experience, they've done the EPP, they have the recency, then they would be eligible for the 2A. If they have more than 3 years experience, they'd be eligible for the 2B. If they have so they would have to have had done some kind of program to get into even the 5. If they didn't have the recency, then they would get a provisional. I think you guys, given kind of what the work we've done in the 5 and in the 1-2, that this is already kind of would be in there. So it would, I think it either needs to say class 1, 2, 3, 4, or 6 license may be issued to a military spouse who holds a current out-of-state unrestricted license. I don't think you either got to take out that is equivalent to or greater than, or remove it altogether. That's how I'm reading it.
I would think that you just take out anything past where it says unrestricted license, period.
Okay, you making a motion there?
I'm making that a motion.
Anybody want to second that?
I'll second it. This is Val.
Okay, we want to take a vote on that?
So I just have a quick question. I'm sorry for interrupting. So would we say that this person wouldn't have to have Indian Ed for All or anything like that? Just a thought. Because I think if we're adding Indian Ed to all classes and we're requiring that stuff like that is important. Those are important standards. Sorry, I think I'm making this very complicated. I'm just trying to think through, somebody comes to Montana and they're automatically going to get a license, and it doesn't say that they have to have any of those additional, meet any of those additional standards. I just want to make sure that we don't unintentionally leave anything out. So maybe if nothing else, I would like to amend the motion to include that Indian Ed for All is at least included in this. And if there are any other standards that are important that folks would like to see, I would suggest that they amend as well.
I would amend my original motion to meet what McCall said.
I would second that.
Dan has
So-
his hand up.
Well, so sorry. So Julie, if someone comes in that's fully licensed from another state, what requirements do we have specifically for them to get a license in Montana? So this is somebody that's, you know, been teaching, licensed, boom, they come in, they're ready to go to work. What are the extra requirements that McCall's getting at there?
That is correct. What McCall is mentioning, EFA would be an additional requirement that's unique to Montana. For our class 3 for the administrative license, that would be the Montana law, finance, and the collective bargaining that we talked about a little bit earlier. So, but I think you guys that when this was brought forward by the feedback group, this was before we did a bunch of the work that we've done for the class 1 and 2. Because now if they come and they have a license, do you remember that chart that Jacob did? If they have less than 3 years, they would be given the 2A, and they'd give 2 years to do the mentorship and induction. But if they had more than 3 years of experience and license, they would go into the 2B. They would just then have to do the EFA or those requirements that we have. If they didn't have them, they still would qualify for the 5 to get them completed. Like the recency, they'd have the 5C, they'd have the 5A if they needed to do, yeah. So we would have it covered, I believe, you guys. Now I don't think it is necessary as it was when we didn't have that piece in there with the 2A, the 2B, and the 5A and 5C.
Dan, you had your hand up, and then McCall.
Yes, and I think there's a key word missing here in 4A, and that is or dependent of. To be a spouse or a dependent of an active duty member, once you're in the active duty service, I mean, there's a whole nother other conditions that you can actually become a dependent of that. And I would sure hate to have someone be denied license because they were a dependent and not just the spouse.
Thank you, Dan. McCall.
Thanks, Jacob. I raised my hand kind of after hearing what Julie said, and it seems like we do have much more flexibility for somebody coming who would be a military spouse or dependent. So I don't know if it's appropriate, Mike, but maybe make a substitute motion to get rid of this section since it doesn't seem like we maybe need it anymore.
Well, the question would be if you still need it for 3, 4, 6.
And I do know through my conversations with NASDAQ that most states have some kind of reciprocity for military, and we're one of the very few that have nothing written. So I think that it's addressing it for that reason, and not because of that reason, but it does address it. I do think that the flexibility helps with that, but to recognize, and you know, since we are changing role, I can tell you we just had an unusual case. She didn't have the 3 years experience. So there are things that are limiting spouses right now as rule stands, but you know, some of the changes that we've made are addressing that. So it kind of goes both ways.
Mike, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm lost as to now what I do with my motion because I've made a motion, I've revised the motion, and
I think we got to burn it.
now I don't know what to do.
Jewel?
I guess I just want to reflect because I know it was Val who brought this issue forward. And so and I agree with what Crystal was talking about. Do we need the recognition of military spouses or dependents if we decide to add that as acknowledging those coming into the state? Because we did that in the legislative session with students and, accepting those immediately. So anyway, Val could probably speak to that because she's the one that brought it up. Thank you.
Go ahead, Val.
So, yeah, Phil and I did hours of research on this, comparing it to other states. And the article that I put in the chat, and I don't know if that can be brought up, but the article was from the military, and they were basically saying that because of financial reasons or family stability with financial reasons, that they wanted that full reciprocity for military spouses. It was hard enough that they were moving their family, but then telling their wife or their husband, well, you're not going to have a job because Montana puts up all these barriers for us to go to their base or their bases or whatever the situation might be. So I was all in for full reciprocity. What that looks like, I don't know, but that's what I would vote for.
Well, what we want to accomplish here, I think, is we want to make sure that anybody who's a military spouse or dependent can get a license, but we want to ensure that they have completed Montana specific things. So for teachers, that's IEFA.
And I don't have a problem with the IEFA. I took the IEFA. It's a day's worth of training and you're done. It's pretty easy.
And for administrators, that's making sure they have professional development in Montana law, CBA development, and the other bullet that escaped me right now. So can we just add those specificities to this? So it just says, we give you reciprocity, but we need you to do these Montana specific things.
Can we put that as like B and C, because it says the applicant must, and then it says A, and then continue that with B and C and specify IEFA for all applicants, and then what it needs to be done for administrators? I'm just putting a note in the tracker so that we remember that we're remembering. So just let me know what you want me to say.
Mike, did you have something else, Mike?
I was just going back to amend my original motion 3 or 4 motions ago. That we remove that line where we did and then put in and I guess I wanted to make sure that Julie could straighten me out on whether we actually need to specifically say the IEFA in this section, or did she feel that that was already covered in previous and it doesn't need to be covered under this section? And I would also like to add the word dependent into my original motion, if anybody even remembers what that is, including me.
Julie, it is 2:30.
I'm listening to you. Let me put it in there right now. Yeah, Jacob, I know we need to do a time thing. I want to do a check to see if maybe if folks could stay on for a little bit longer. I really would like to get to, yeah. So hold on one second. Let me put some things in there. Mike, I heard you. So you want both, actually. You want to have the IEFA in there and then the piece around the administration component and add dependent. Correct?
Julie, I'm doing it on the tracker if you don't. I've got it all, just so you know.
Okay. All right. So can we make a motion then for what?
Well, first I'll remove my substitute motion.
I think we were gonna put it under 5, Julie, but we could deal with that later.
Okay, I can do that. Okay, all right, let's take the motion while I'm,
So if I was writing everything down correctly while everyone's speaking, the motion would be something along the lines of removing the language after unrestricted license, including Montana-specific requirements, and adding the word dependent.
Yes, that would be my original motion.
Yeah, and so make sure we get this correct here. So Julie, battling the formatting, is it just ARM 1057 215 that talks about those?
it talks about the piece about the, I would have to go back and check, but I think so, yes. It's talking about, what I'm referencing there is the, those courses that we talked about, the law and the finance. But I can double check. But yes, that's what I'm referencing there.
Okay, I mean, that's all we want them to have to do, to have the hours in those courses. So.
Yep.
Do people feel comfortable having that clarity, knowing that 1057-215 is referencing the law and the collective bargaining language that we discussed earlier today on moving forward and putting this forward as a recommendation? Mike has made a motion that we do that. Anybody second that?
Julie, Dan makes a clarification. He said it should read and or a dependent.
In the title also, correct?
Yeah. We're doubling work right now, Julie. I feel bad. I have it all
You're
done.
okay. You're good.
You want me to
Feel
share
bad.
my screen? Because I'm.
Nah, we're good.
Okay.
I think these guys are catching me right in the process.
I know.
This
I just,
immediate feedback is beautiful.
it is. I just feel bad because you're talking and writing and I'm taking care of it.
I'm good. Multitasking. Okay, what do you think, Mike? Does this fit with what your motion is?
That fits my motion. I'm just wondering if anyone now will still second it.
This is Diane, I'll second.
All right. Thank you, Diane. Press for time. Anybody opposed to adding in this language? Okay. As it is, it looks good. And we'll just know that there will be work done as it goes through, additional recommendations, or if it ever becomes final, to make sure that that's clear in the last bullet, that what we're referring to are those Montana specific courses for administrators.
Okay. All
Hey,
right.
Julie.
So, yeah, Jacob. So I'd like to propose, guys, if possible, to maybe keep a quorum here. Can we stay until 4 so we can get through this 222 and then take a look at the ones? I would like, I'm recognizing that there's some comments too in the chat that we'll have to address, but I first would just like to just kind of do a poll to see if folks can stay till 4 so we can bring some closure, knowing that we're still going to have to jump back on together to do we are planning a crosswalk down the road between 57 and 58, at which we would be bringing this group back together. So Tristan, I know folks are putting things in the chat box. Is there a way to keep folks till 4?
I can keep the Zoom open as long as I don't end it. So we're good there.
Okay. So are you guys good to stay till 4?
Angela's nominated.
Angela?
Go ahead.
Thank you so much. And I really don't want to be a hair in the hamburger right now. I mean, part of what really, part of what intrigued me about the opportunity to to participate in this work was the conversation around Class 8. And I did have to leave last week when I think we broached it. And I think I left at 3:15. So to hear that that conversation has come and gone, but I it was a little bit unnerving for me, but I did hear a willingness to discuss it. However, I do have a very important meeting at 3:30 today. I'm not sure what we can do to circle back to Class 8 because I wasn't sure what the protocol was going to be for it. I thought that we were going to kind of walk through it like we had the other pieces. I do know, I did look at the markup, the blue language, have no qualms with what was added, but I'm not sure what you would have me do and perhaps others who might be interested in some new language there or some cross outs of maybe some pieces in there do along Class 8. Recognize.
So, Angela, what in particular are you talking about for Class 8 so I can understand, if you will?
So what I would like to do, I guess, first of all, let me just say that we perceive the Class 8 to be a real barrier to dual enrollment growth across the state, in particular in our BNRC schools. You know, if anybody tuned into the CISPAC and the Council of Deans meeting, you heard a very well articulated conversation about declining graduation numbers, not necessarily rates, but numbers up through 2024. I think we're supposed to see that. Getting more students into the workforce is what we're focused on here at the Office of the Commissioner. And we think that we can train them while in high school through dual enrollment. And knowing that it's a barrier, what we've been eyeballing throughout this process is getting to a serious Class 8 conversation. And I guess what I wanted to offer for this group today is taking a look at it and crossing out Roman numeral C2 all the way through C. So you would get rid of the, let's see, 1, C, Roman numeral 2, and then go down to 1A all the way through C and cross it out. So basically,
so Jacob, can you pull up, please, rule for chapter 4 with mentorship? Okay, I'm scrolling down there, Angela. And your proposal is to do, say it one more time.
And it would be for Class 8.
Okay, I'm getting there.
And I really,
yeah, I'm there.
So much for indulging this. I really,
of course.
With the schedule
okay.
Like we did, I just couldn't stay on last week.
I know. So what are you proposing?
Okay, so when you get there, if you could go to 1 C, Roman numeral 2, and then cross out Roman numeral 2, and then the A that is below it, the B that is below it, and the C that is below it. Uh-oh. There we go. Yep.
Tell me if I'm getting this.
You are, Julie. This is wonky.
Okay.
I know. And
you're okay. And then, and then completion though of the EFA, leave that.
Yes, keep that. But also, I wanted to offer or completion of the Montana University System Indian Education for All for 1 MUS course, which is basically the same course, but it has our post-secondary components in it. And I can supply you with the name of that. And so, and then if you would go up there, one more thing, under the Roman numeral 1, you would go to the Roman numeral 2 and cross that out as well. And so there you go. And those would be the recommendations that I would hope that folks could consider. In the last 2 Board of Regents meetings, the Class 8, and we think these pieces in particular have been cited as a barrier to dual enrollment growth, therefore a barrier to dual enrollment opportunities for our students in our most rural schools. And so I wanted to broach that conversation with this group today. I mean, these are already what you have here that are crossed out, core expectations on our campuses across the state. Certainly the Indian education for all, very, very important. The background check, very, very important. And of course, the recommendation from the CAO. But I wanted to get this out here before this committee, out ahead of this chapter moving forward in its entirety.
Okay, Angela, I think I got it. So it's basically leaving it as it is for verifying the chief academic officer that you're employed at a college or university, that you're in compliance with all other non-academic requirements for licensure, that and that you can teach you have an endorsement in that area, and then that you have verification of EFA.
That's correct. And then they would still have to go through review by the CISPAC.
And this, okay, yep, which is number 4.
Thank you, Julie. That was fast and good.
Okay, so how about we, guys, if we could go back to, do we want to take a motion on this right now? Or do we want to go back to 2 and finish up 1 and then come back here?
I would move to accept this language that Angela just proposed, or the deletion of the language that Angela just proposed.
Yeah, she just removed some barriers there, which I agree with that actually after you guys validating this. I think those things with the process and the application, she's spot on.
Diane.
Does anyone want to take go ahead?
Yes, I think there's been some quick discussion. I do think that this is an area that should move forward, and I would encourage higher ed to look at what we might do to increase this opportunity for experienced high school teachers or experienced teachers in content areas, so that we may have the same level of consideration to our K-12 teachers who may want to teach courses as well. So as we're making this more doable, I would like higher ed also to give the same consideration to K-12 teachers as well. And I guess I'd like your comment, Angela, as I vote on that.
Sharon, you have your hand up again.
Yeah, I'd agree with Diane about that. Coming from a very small school, it certainly would help if experienced teachers in K-12 were allowed to, without the master's degree in the subject, if experienced teachers in K-12 were allowed to do dual enrollment and dual credit through our MUS. And that's not a part of this rule at all. But I think as long as we have you two folks from MUS here on the conversation, I think that's just a good conversation to keep in the background. Thanks.
John.
Yeah, I think that master's conversation is a good conversation to have. It is, I think, part of our accreditation standards that we can't have courses at the college level taught with someone with a bachelor's degree. So I don't know that it's something that we have control over, but I think it's definitely something that we'd be open to having discussions about and looking at.
All right. The language as it is on the screen, we had a motion to accept that. Does anybody second that?
I'll second, Diane.
Thank you, Diane. In the name of time, is anybody opposed to making the changes that are on the screen? Okay, let's move that along. Julie, let's just quickly go back to 2. And the inclusion of the last rule there as a recommendation to go into chapter 2, clarifying educator preparation program verification by the superintendent. Is anybody opposed to that?
Okay, let's go to 1. Jacob, you want to pull up 1 then? And I think we're going to bring it to a finish here in 1. These are the definitions, you guys, to encompass what we've defined as an EPP. This 3B, Roman numeral 2, is that language that we moved over to 2. Under 8A, we defined 3 years old to grade 3 to be P3. We've moved the exchange teacher out of 2 to 9. We've added in a definition for mentorship program. I tried to align it, you guys, directly with what we've got in chapter 55, as defined in chapter 55, what mentorship and induction program means, so that it connects those two. We talked in 13 that the North Central Association actually is no longer in existence and actually became the Higher Learning Commission. 14 is this this is just kind of cleanup language, you guys, that of demonstrating that preparation of that supervised teaching through evidence as aligned in 102, which is just up above, which does include the transcript, if you will. And then we did put in a piece for unrestricted license. That was a comment last week, I believe, you guys, to say we're using that term quite frequently. What do we mean by that? So if we're saying a current standard unrestricted license, what do we mean? It means a current renewable license. That is not an emergency, provisional, or lifetime. So when we say unrestricted, it's not somebody coming in with a provisional or an emergency license. It has to be a license. It's a standard license out of state that's current, renewable, and does not have provisional status on it. So those were the definitions, cleanup, if you will, based upon the other changes that we made in subchapters 2 through 6.
Sharon.
Thank you. I am in complete agreement with all except for underneath Romanet 2B, an educator preparation program that is approved or accredited. I feel like that opens a door that we will not ever be able to close. And the original language that we had seemed to be able to provide the high quality standards for all of our students and our teachers. I approved by a state board causes me heartburn.
So the key consideration, I think, here for context again, Sharon, is that will deal with teachers who are licensed. We're not aware of any educator preparation programs that people would go through that are strictly approved by the state board that don't lead to licensure. So does that make sense? But what happens is there are programs where people would achieve a license and then they may move to Montana, and then actually their license is not considered. Their license would not transfer because their program might have just been approved by the state board and not be a regionally accredited program.
Yeah.
I don't know if that changes your thought, but that's the, again, context.
Yep.
Is Dan, oh, sorry, go ahead. I was going to say, is Dan still here? Because he could give an example or 2 or 3 if he's still there.
Yeah. I think we've talked quite a bit about this last week, you guys, when we talked about looking at those alternative pathways. And so that's what Sharon's alluding to, if you will, and Jacob. So, yeah. And so what we're saying here is we would want the EPP program that anyone attends, in-state, out-of-state, must be in a program that leads to and is approved and accredited by a state board leading to licensure, is what we have proposed here in the language. So anybody want to make a motion to vote on the definitions?
I have a question.
Yes, Diane.
You know, there are states, or there have been states where local districts have their own programs for, in cases where there are shortages of teachers. And that then is given approval by the State Board of Education. And I think we're thinking perhaps that every state does things like we do, but in the past, I know I would like to investigate more thoroughly whether all states have a similar methodology that we do, where we don't have some states approving programs that may not be compatible with what the quality that Montana has had. So I don't know that for sure, but I know in the past there have been definitely cases where, well, for in some examples, just in my past history being on the National Association of State Boards, there are circumstances where a state board may try to have control and they eliminate the whole state board. And so I think there's more controversy that could jump out at us from this total. I mean, I realize that it can be a barrier. So just, I would urge us to be very careful in assuming that this is a small change when it could be a very big change to what happens. And it could create more of a political nature to the work that we all do when our, accreditation processes are done thoroughly and carefully. I would want to ensure that we're not endorsing something that we wouldn't endorse as a state otherwise.
And Sharon, I think that's why we put that language, if you will, that was included here that you see redlined and kept it. It just wasn't necessarily a definition, if you will, but we've kept that language. It's just located in a different location. Okay, so in terms of definitions, do we want to take a motion or not?
I guess I would recommend, if we're leaving a few things out there for a future meeting, we leave this one out here too, and maybe do some of that research that Diane suggested. I would help with that.
Yeah, guys, the only next meeting that we would be proposing would be looking at a cross section between 57 and 58 is what we're looking at. We're hoping to bring these recommendations, start moving some of the recommendations to the superintendent for consideration. So I'm just wondering if it is possible to take a vote on where we're at with this, recommend this or not, these definitions.
This is Dan, and I would recommend taking this language additions and changes, I guess, forward.
Sean?
Yeah, I would agree. And so I second that motion if that's what's needed.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. Thinking about what Diane was saying kind of sparked me. In Houston, for example, it doesn't run anymore, but for a while they ran a program where you could get a license in Houston public schools. It was approved by the board, but it wasn't a state license. It didn't go, you couldn't go teach in Dallas, for example. But the way this reads, because it was an approved program accredited by the state, would we then give that person who couldn't even teach in the state of Texas a license in Montana because the board had approved that program in Houston?
No. No, John, it'd have to be approved and accredited by the state board.
But it would be, it was approved. It just didn't lead to state licensure. It led to district level licensure.
But that'd be a restricted license. That'd be a restricted license. So then you wouldn't.
Yeah. Because it's not leading to licensure.
Sharon. Sharon.
So the language says approved or accredited. It doesn't say approved and accredited.
I think it's a definition for what Montana considers to be an accredited program, right?
Show me. Well, I mean, maybe.
No, I think you're right, Sharon. You're right about that, or it should read and. It shouldn't be an or. It should be approved and accredited. Okay, so we have a motion. Are we going to take a motion to vote on these or no? Where are we at?
Well, I did supply a motion and then it was seconded. Yeah.
Okay, so Jacob, if we could take a vote, please, on these definitions.
Okay, Nick, vote yes is to keep them as they are, and no is to you don't support them. So Nick.
Yes. Yes.
Mike.
Yes.
Diane.
No.
McCall.
I'm so sorry. Is this including the and language or the or language? Or is this the original motion, or is this the new information that's on the screen?
What's on the screen?
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Jewel.
Yes.
Erica.
Yes.
Sean supported the motion, so he's a yes. Christine.
Yes.
Heather.
Yes.
I think Dan made the motion. Val
Yes.
and Sharon.
As long as that's an and. Yes.
I got you an and in there, girl. Okay, so good. Okay, did we get everybody, Jacob?
Yes, everybody voted to move forward.
Okay, so then there's just one last thing, you guys. This is with the emergency authorization, which was around, we had talked about this last time, that we can't put a time limit on it because of MCAs that currently takes precedence. But we did add a piece around that emergency of employment is not available for special education teachers because of federal regulations around IDA. Of that you have to have, you cannot issue emergency authorizations for folks in special ed according to IDA and then them serve it. So that's what that addition there is. So that would be the final thing. So I would like to see if you guys want to consider talking about that, voting on that, and then we would be commenced until we have a reunion with a bigger group of people over in 58. But anybody want to talk about that?
I might just have a quick question, and that would be whether, would this automatically, if that for some reason were changed in federal regulations, would this automatically go away then?
Yes, Diane, it would if
Okay,
they, yeah. Because of the way it says prohibited under federal regulations.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I would make a motion to accept that language.
I would second that. This is Mike.
Anybody opposed to the motion? Okay. Thanks, everybody. For that, Julie, any final words?
Well, I wish I could say this was goodbye for a while, but I don't think it's going to be. So I've got your numbers. Be careful. I just want to say thank you for the time and just this incredible, good, deep thinking about the quality educators that we want to ensure are working with our kids here in the state of Montana. The passion is remarkable. And I am glad to be a part of this team and call it this team. I will say, though, we do want to at some point do get back together and at least have some representation here from 57 to do a crosswalk with 58. So we will take a look at that. I would say that next steps, you guys, for this, and I see that McCall has something to say, but is that we're going to take these forward and recommend them to the superintendent. Jewel, we've tried to really keep that tracker updated. And so we'll be communicating back out with the group, Crystal and I, to be sure you guys are in the loop and keep you apprised as to what is happening so that we can stay in contact to just say, you know, these have been moved forward, where are we at? And so that you can kind of keep track of where the work is headed. And then when I get more information of when we'll be ready to do a crosswalk, I'm hoping that at least a good portion of you guys will be able to join us. So McCall, you had something you wanted to add?
Thanks, Julie. I just wanted to ask if you guys had any indication on when you thought you may bring this to SISBAC. That was a question that they had asked me today in our meeting of just, you know, when will we potentially have a special meeting? And I wasn't sure and just thought I would ask that now.
McCall, I'll bring that forward to Cheryl so she can loop back with you about that. So you guys can kind of figure that out. I'll send her that note today. Crystal and I will, okay? That she needs to circle up with you about the SISBAC component.
Thank you.
You betcha. You betcha. I'm going to use my northern accent.
Didn't know if that was an Anaconda accent or if you were doing something else.
Well, you know, I do run the streets of Anaconda once in a while. I was just there on Monday, girlfriend.
Dang.
All right. You know,
And
just looking at
the
you all.
tracker is up to date, effective now. So if you want to look at it, I'm tired. Yeah. it's there.
So,
Can you
yeah,
tell?
and so you guys, people have the link to that, right? So that's where we'll try to keep that current, but we will be trying to keep you guys in the loop, sending updates and messages. And it looks like we got quite a few folks who would be willing to help do the crosswalk. So thank you guys. I really appreciate that. I think that's going to be important. And that could help. So we have a nice full package delivered. Okay. Thank you guys. Much appreciated. I don't have any final words. Does anybody have any final thoughts they want to say before they head out of here? Thanks, John. I see quite a few people. I think Sharon said she would, Diane. So good. We must like hanging out together.
You know, I used to say this at times to some of my wonderful students, and I never meant it. And so I'll just say, out of a piece of humor, goodbye, good riddance. But I don't mean it. It's been a pleasure to work with all of you.
Thanks, Diane. All righty, you guys. You have a great rest of your day and week, and stay tuned. We'll be back in touch.
All right, thank you.
Hey, Chris,
Bye-bye.
before you
Bye.
hop off, Chris, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Just based on the information that Angela shared today about the class 8, and just because it's totally on my mind since we had one today, what do you think that would look like then coming to SISBAC? And we can talk about this again if your head is mush, but I'm just trying to think like what that packet, because some of the members afterwards are like, what is that? You know, because I said